It was the middle of the night in a village in the Helmand province of Afghanistan. American Special Forces and their Afghan partners had just stormed a large home, suspecting a Taliban terrorist was inside. While the men of the house had been rounded up into one room by soldiers, the women and children sat elsewhere. They had something to say, but they weren't allowed to speak to any men. That's where the Female Tactical Platoon, or FTP, came in.
And the global war on terror, especially in some of the cultures we went into where it was important to separate like men and women, the U.S. military realized really early that they would need to have partners and allies that could interact with female populations or be on target and take care of kids. And the Female Tactical Platoon Leaders was an incredible program that grew out of making sure that you could honor cultural requirements and traditions and still accomplish the mission. And so what ended up happening is there was groups of incredible women who would work as an extension often of special operations teams and help accomplish really complex missions with a degree of cultural nuance and flexibility that's really hard to overstate.
These few dozen Afghan women served alongside Allied soldiers and officers and were some of the bravest people fighting the global war on terror. They conducted vital intelligence work and saved the lives of countless people, including many Americans. And when the withdrawal took place in August of 2021, many of these women were brought to the United States to avoid punishment or death at the hands of the Taliban. As they adjusted to their new country, they started looking for opportunity. And that's where entrepreneurs Alex McLeod and Army Major Jay Long came into the picture. A married couple, Alex had experience starting social enterprise companies, and Jay had excelled in his years as an officer. Together, they had started an organization called Re-Up, the Refugee Upskilling Program, and were immediately blown away by the women of the FTP.
Manaz Akbari is probably one of the most famous of the female tactical platoon leaders. I mean, she's just a boss. She is the best. And she went through the program. There were people who had served with her that also joined. And then there was also a subgroup of them that wanted to then become entrepreneurs and start businesses.
But that's where the members of the FTP started hitting some major roadblocks.
The US system is really unique and difficult to navigate if you've just arrived and you're looking to start a business. To get access to capital, to get a loan or funding from any lender, you need to have a credit history. Even the concept of a loan through the financial system was something that's a bit unique to the US. In Afghanistan, people don't trust the bank the same way that people in the US do, and that's kind of why we created Parlay, is because we said, okay, there are all these really skilled, really awesome people who definitely have the grit to be entrepreneurs, but who also may not have the background to understand what it takes to get to a yes. And we thought that was unfair. These are some of the most skilled, courageous, daring, committed partners that the US has ever had.
Alex and Jay realized they needed to do more than just provide the women of the FTP with the appropriate skills. They set out to make it easier for talented refugees, as well as others, to receive important small business funding by creating a platform that lenders could use to streamline the process. It was a simple solution, but as we all know, that's only half the battle. In 2022, Alex McLeod and Major Jay Long created Parlay Protocol, an AI-assisted lending platform for financial institutions that streamlines the process of reviewing and approving small business loans. Like all startups, it's had its ups and downs, but it has the potential to make lives easier for millions of Americans. It's just the latest venture for this Army couple, who are tech and social enterprise innovators and always looking out for veterans. In today's episode, our hosts sit down with Alex and Jay to discuss the ins and outs of creating a startup company, how their military family history and early experiences have influenced who they are, and what to look for in a business partner and a spouse. I'm Carrie Varro Heikis, and this is Army Matters.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of You Know What? Army Matters podcast series. And I am your co-host, the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army, retired Dan Dailey. And I'm here with a very special person who I'm very fond of.
Your best buddy, your best podcast buddy, Lieutenant General retired Leslie C. Smith, the 66th Inspector General of the United States Army. Dan.
Yeah.
Where are you today? You're in a beautiful part of the country. Where are you?
Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Nice.
With our Pikes Peak chapter.
Of AUSA, one of our best
Of
chapters,
AUSA.
right? Well, all of our chapters are good, but they're one of our good
Oh, they're
ones.
all
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Yeah. Be
Yeah.
careful. You'll get one of the chapters mad at us. We'll get in trouble. We'll get in trouble.
You gotta get in trouble. I know.
So, Les, if you and your wife, Renidra, started the business together, what would it be?
Miss Venedra, we've actually talked about it. She really wants a tropical smoothie franchise.
That's very specific.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Because she likes tropical smoothies.
I guess that's a good
Yeah, I
reason.
mean, you know,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
You know, I think many couples talk about, starting a business someday. We've thrown around a couple ideas, restaurant. I always wanted to create a brewery because, I brew beer. We've talked about that in the past. That would be fun. I also have aspirations to be a handyman. I'm really good with tools and wiring. And
Dan's handyman shop?
That's exactly what I was going to call it. And then Holly would run all the books, because she's a finance major. And I don't know. You can show up and ring the doorbell. Hi, I'm Dan Dailey, the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army. Oh, co-host of the Army Matters podcast,
Yes.
and I'm here to change your light bulbs.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Here we go. Last question. What's the best banking or investment decision you have ever made?
I think purchasing our first house and then and becoming deliberate about investing. I mean, it's easy to say that, and even when you have the TSP, for our listeners, especially if you're still on active duty, just do it. And if you work at a company, do the matching and just forget about it. And just really being deliberate about it. But find somebody who looks out for your interests versus their own.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. So this is an interesting story. I was at the Strategic Leaders Seminar, the first enlisted guy to ever go to that up at the Carlisle War College. So I'm an SLS fellow. I'm proud of that. And they had an elective, and this guy from the Federal Reserve was there to teach us about economics, right? And being the NCO, I was diligent in my studies. I went to the electives, and I was the only one that showed up. So I got like one-on-one advice about how interest rates work and how they vary them, and where mortgage rates come from. So I sat and listened to this guy and listened to him, and I started studying everything he taught me. And 30 days from the day we met, I watched the market. I refinanced my home, which led me to be able to cut a 30-year mortgage to 15, double down on my payments, and pay my house off in 4 years. All because I went to an elective at an Army school.
So Dan,
Yeah.
are you going to be on CNBC? I'm looking forward to seeing you there, brother.
Well, I appreciate being nice to me, but I don't think my knowledge is good enough for CNBC. But I do understand that the two individuals you sat down to talk with might be very apt at being on CNBC.
That's right.
Well, let's listen to your interview with Alex McLeod and Jay Long.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant General retired Leslie C. Smith. And today, not only do we have one guest, we have two guests. This is going to be a good discussion. So Alex and Jay, welcome to Army Matters.
Thanks for having us.
We're grateful to be here. Yeah.
So let's start off with something fun. Now, you both are based in Virginia, but calling into this call from Austin. But I really want to talk about something special and near and dear to both of your hearts. Buffalo. So Jay, I understand you're from there.
Yes.
Yeah. And Alex, you were studying there when the two of you met?
That's right.
Was it cold there?
It was so cold.
Was it so cold?
It was so cold. I arrived about 3 weeks before something called Snowvember, which I think was it was a really good representation of what it means to live in Buffalo, because 7 feet of snow came in, which is a good welcome. Yeah.
Interesting. So Alex, if you were the tourism person for the city, what would you do to sell people to come visit and live in Buffalo?
Ooh, I would say you will never meet anyone with more heart than people from Buffalo. They are so kind. They are so nice. They will come dig you out of your driveway if it snows. You know, I came across from the UK to help build a social impact company. Mm-hmm. We were looking at different Rust Belt cities to stand up a tech manufacturing facility to upskill individuals who used to have jobs in manufacturing and then lost them. And we were looking at different places all around the country, and Buffalo stood out because people said, okay, what do you need? You need an accountant? Here. You need a space? Here. What else do you need? You need people? And they were just ready.
Really?
And that spirit, that energy, that's Buffalo, definitely.
I think I'd add too, and I think one of the cool parts of Buffalo organically, and I don't know if it's our trajectory as a city, I don't know if it's the industries that were there,
it's the Bills,
is that the team sport vibe. Yeah, I mean, to your point on the Bills, like the things we care about, right, are team oriented. Families are close, communities are close. There's like this very much it takes a village vibe. And I'd say to your earlier question, like if you were selling a city, what would you highlight? You know, there's a definitely a period in Buffalo's history where it's like the most powerful city in New York, Erie Canal, major distribution center for like central US. And then there was potentially like Empire Strikes Back style moment with some like the international trade considerations. But I think what we're seeing now is what you start looking for from a place to live is where you'd want to raise your family and the communities you want to be part of and where you'd want to spend time. And I think that's a space where Buffalo is disproportionately awesome.
So my next question is for you also, Alex. So you're proficient in multiple languages. So can you say, come visit Buffalo in each of them? Now describe what the language is first and then say what it is. What you going to say?
Okay, I'm going to do it in one language. So I was raised in France, so I speak French and have done since I was a little kid. Okay. Je parle français, yes. And because it's so close to Canada, I think that's the good one. So I would say, venez visiter Buffalo.
Okay, yeah, that was quick. Alex, did you
Sounds cool, yeah.
Do you speak any other languages, sir?
Not well enough to speak publicly.
Okay, all right. So let's jump into background. So, Alex, you were born in Hong Kong, and so that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Grew up in France, like we talked about, and originally are British. And some of your family members served in the British Navy. What did they do, and what did that teach you?
Oh, gosh. So my grandfather was a captain in the Royal Navy. He served in the Second World War, and he was actually taken prisoner of war for 5 years.
Really?
Yes. So he wrote a very intense book called Never Forget Nor Forgive about that time that he spent in a concentration camp. But he obviously service is a huge part of my family as a result. And my grandmother was also in the Women's Royal Navy Service. And then my uncle also served. So it's a strong thread. Jay and I have had to, reconcile that technically from a family perspective, I'm a Navy person. And so how does, which side, do we support during the Army-Navy football game? And still sometimes I go back and forth, but the service piece runs deep for sure.
We have to talk about that because you can only support one team.
That's right.
So I'm just saying. Now, Jay, two of your grandparents also served in the military. Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
My paternal grandfather was in the 101st during World War II. And so when I served as a platoon leader in my early time in the Army, was also in the 101st, which was like a really cool baton pass moment. He was an infantryman, an enlisted guy, which is cool. And then my maternal grandfather was a navigator in the Air Force during like the Cold War, Korean War era. And so I think very similar to Alex, service was always part of the community and always part of the conversation with family. and something that we're deeply grateful for. And then an uncle also served in the Army. So there's always like this theme and thread of service being really important.
I have to shift to you being a West Point cadet. I understand that you got in trouble once or twice, maybe more, but that's the editor says only once and twice. So tell us about that. How many walking hours did you have? Now describe to our listeners, what are walking hours and how do you get those?
Yeah, so I'd say one of the most positive experiences in my life actually was getting to study and grow up in the academy for a couple of reasons. One, like the emphasis on ownership is very real. And like it's hard to fake that, right? The academy does a really good job on that. Two, like the honor code component, thou shalt not lie, cheat, or steal, is also something that I think the academy inculcates in its graduates in a way that's really effective. However, you can uphold those and still potentially like move fast and break things, to use a startup term. And so I spent a lot of my time at the academy trying to see how to best achieve potentially non-traditional goals and objectives in a way that like made the most sense in terms of use of time, with perhaps not always making the most sense in terms of mitigating risk. And so at the academy, if you get in a little bit of trouble, you get a few hours. You get in a lot of trouble, you get more hours. If you have over 100, you're called a century man. And I crossed that substantially.
So were you a double century man or were you just a century man?
The stats seem to indicate pretty close to double century.
Wow.
I have to get the official transcripts to confirm.
Okay.
But what I'll note.
Well, I mean, there's more to that story.
Okay, yeah, come on, tell us. We want to know.
Yeah,
okay.
So the 2 times I got hit with hours, there was heads of state that visited within a matter of weeks. And then, for those unfamiliar, like the academy has a tradition where if a head of state visits, they're able to grant amnesty for anyone who's dealing with any hours or infractions. So essentially like a clean slate. So twice I got hit intensely, twice got wiped off. And then for a lot of the other ones, I was incredibly lucky and grateful to be on the judo team and boxing teams at West Point.
Nice.
And as part of being a competitive athlete, you're allowed to essentially have like a study hall experience. So I was able to use that time for those things. And I was substantially grateful.
Okay, so in translation, you got over a little bit. It's okay. I mean, I didn't go to West Point, so I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I was very grateful for how the dust settled on the
right to that. So we're going to talk about Parlay in a bit, but I think one of your first business ventures was about creating a program to help people out in Haiti after one of their earthquakes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I was studying at university for my undergrad in Cambridge, in England, I met a team that had a family foundation out in Haiti that had been helping rebuild houses following the earthquake in 2011. And what they had realized was, hey, everyone is rebuilding houses. If we don't give people jobs or a path to employment so they can look after their families, it's a Band-Aid measure, right? Like it is, people need shelter, but also we need to give them more than just that. And they were exploring whether it was possible to build a venture that was for profit so that it could be more sustainable and not just a nonprofit that helped upskill women into jobs where they could build and assemble technology. So tablets and phones, things that would allow people to be connected, that would allow people to work, that would allow people to go back to school, right? All of this infrastructure was completely destroyed. And this team said, yes, we're going to do this. And I said, awesome. Have you built the business plan? And they said, no, we haven't. And I said, can I write it? And they're like, sure, yeah, you can do it. Go ahead. And that was it. That kicked off a lifelong pursuit of trying to solve hard problems in creative and interesting ways.
Now, the two of you then started a nonprofit called Globally Re-Up. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it led directly to the starting of Parlay?
So after Afghanistan fell, like many other veterans who served there, we got really involved with resettlement efforts. And we first realized there's probably an opportunity to help allies and partners land impactful jobs. So Re-Up, the refugee upskilling program, was stood up under a nonprofit led by a guy named Josh Marcuse, who's been a tremendous force for good in the defense innovation community. We ended up seeing that there's this potentially more silent problem, which is financial integration. So in the US, sometimes getting access to an apartment is contingent on having credit scores, and getting access to jobs or a card to get to a job is contingent on capital access. So there's like this big problem. behind the scenes. And as we spent more time and energy working on how to help with capital access, we saw that there was this gigantic opportunity to help people across the country. Up to 100 million Americans, depending on your degrees, are unbanked or underbanked. And that in the US, small business lending in some ways is akin to like micro lending, which won the Nobel Prize for Muhammad Yunus with Grameen Bank. So there's this really cool opportunity to expand access in a way that's sustainable and empowers communities by focusing on the way that they can access the resources they need to create impactful jobs.
Josh Marcuse, who said, guys, come do this here. And he let us kind of run this program under globally. And a group of incredible people came through it. And so even just laying the groundwork to help people understand that stuff, that took a long time. We worked on it as best we could. We were not experts, by the way. We now have become pretty darn knowledgeable on that because it's just so difficult and so complicated. And that's kind of why we created Parlay, is because we said, okay, there are all these really skilled, really awesome people who definitely have the grit to be entrepreneurs, but who also may not have the background to understand what it takes to get to a yes.
So how did you meet? Who saw who first? And, give us a little bit. The inquiring minds want to know.
Jay, you want to kick this off?
Sure. So as an Army officer, I was lucky enough to get to 1099 a little bit. And my best friend from high school was the brother of Alex's best friend from her MBA program. And so when I landed, I was like, hey, is anything going on? And he said, you should probably come out and join us. I was like, great. And I, before Alex, didn't believe or know if love at first sight was a real thing. And within like a matter of moments, it became incredibly apparent that this was the most incredible and impressive woman I've met in my life. And the decision was made pretty much immediately, at least on my end.
All right, Alex, from your end, what did you think when you first met him?
It was very similar. I'd had a bad day, and I remember being at this dinner, not being in a good mood. And my friends know that I'm not in a good mood, and they're trying to figure out how to make things better. And Jay walks into the room, and there is very much a before and after to that. Not in a like cutesy way, in a just, okay, things shifted way. And yeah, I mean, since then, I think basically that first meeting onwards, Jay and I have been building stuff, creating stuff, doing stuff together since. I don't think we can help ourselves. It's like maybe a bad habit, but it definitely persists in what we do today.
So what was the exact moment when the two of you discovered you made a good team as co-founders? Somebody with a military tech background and somebody else with a multiple language background.
Yeah, I can start on this one. We were working on a project in like the national security innovation space, or at least I was. And I was chewing on it, and we had ideas about how do you better bring Silicon Valley strategies and techniques to the tactical edge. And at this point, it was entirely verbal discussion. And Alex asked very succinctly, like, is this written down anywhere or in any form of a deck that a leader could understand and adjust? And my answer was no, because as a soldier, I was used to just kind of briefing, and that was sufficient. And immediately we got to work laying out the foundations and framework for methodologies that we later use in a host of environments.
I think what Jay and I have, diversity of approach. Like Jay thinks very differently from the way that I think. We'll get to the same end venue or location, but we did not arrive there the same way. And Jay will challenge my thinking. I'm very result oriented. If I have a goal, it will happen. Fair warning to anyone who tries to get in the way. Whereas Jay is up and out, very divergent thinking. Hey, there's 1,000 ways we could get to this goal. Why did you pick these 5 or whatever? And I think the interplay between those two styles of work forces me to think more outside of the goal to make sure that we have the right goal, and forces him to think more practically about how that goal could become a reality. And sometimes people think, oh, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I need to be able to do it all. And that's a real fallacy, right? You can never learn how to do everything. But it is your job if you're gonna have a super skill, right? If you're really good at one thing and that's your thing that you're incredible at, you better find someone else who can balance you on the things that you're bad at, that they're exceptional at, or else you guys will you'll have blinders that prevent you from really achieving that long-term success.
Yeah, there's two really famous investors in the Valley, Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen, and they famously have worked together for decades now. And there's a quote that's rough, like, they stick together because at least once a day, they like end up fighting over the way each other's thinking, but that positive sparring partner equivalent ends up challenging how they operate in a way that's super impactful. And I think we've been really lucky to experience a similar dynamic here.
Join AUSA, the Army's premier professional association and host of the largest land power exposition in the United States. AUSA is open to everyone, including all ranks and components. So whether you have a relationship with the U.S. Army or simply want to honor those who serve, you can learn more online at ausa.org/join.
Welcome back, everyone, to Army Matters. Now, Jay and Alex, the company you're working on today is called Parlay Protocol. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is and what it does?
So we basically built software that helps the lender and the small business or the entrepreneur better collaborate to get them to a yes with that request for a loan. So we help the small business by providing an interface to apply that is easy, that gives them insights on how to improve. And then we basically use AI technology to make that as easy and efficient for the lender to be able to help the small business too. So our customer in that dynamic is the lender, but the small business owner, the entrepreneur, benefits because we're embedding education and an easy and intuitive process into that for them as they go.
What's really cool about building the company is the amount of Army DNA that's been injected. So for example, we're a loan intelligence system. As a category, that was developed in tandem with a former West Pointer named Bruce Cleveland. The software we leverage and use to support our customers and provide capital access was built in large part from veterans that were alumni of the Army Software Factory.
For our listeners, what was the Army Software Factory? Austin, Texas?
Yes.
So tell everybody what it is. We know what it is, but you got to describe it.
For sure. So the Army realized that software engineering needed to be an organic skill set, the same way, say, medical skills are. Like, it's critical enough to the work we do that we need to have it in the house. And so it started this thing called the Army Software Factory based out of Austin, Texas, where it took a ton of absolutely incredible soldiers and trained them to be product managers, UI UX designers, and developers. And a lot of them have transitioned out, and we've been lucky as a team to have several of them on board. And we have, for example, our head of business intelligence was an alumni from the U.S. Special Operations community named Trish. Our engineers are Army Software Factory alums. And so it's for those listening, we're used to service defined one way. There are many super impactful ways that you can expand that definition and continue to be part of a really cool veteran business community that is invested in your success.
Yeah, that's so cool. So what's the hardest moment that you've had in the short life of Parlay?
Probably the beginning. It's always hardest at the beginning. I think it's always hard. But Jay and I, went full time on this in January of 2023. And we said, okay, if this is anything like the way the books and the films are like, let's just start by fundraising and then we can hire people, we can build the business. And March 2023, we went out. We were actually in Austin, speaking of Austin. We decided that we would start this fundraise with an idea on a PowerPoint 2 months in at South by Southwest. And we start to talk to some venture capitalists. We start to, solicit the ideas, get some feedback, et cetera. And that day, the Saturday of South by Southwest, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. And every banker in America had a collective panic attack. And every bank in America had a collective reprioritization where they said, we can no longer care about lending. We have to care about deposits because we don't want to collapse either. And every venture capitalist that has ever backed a company like ours said, hey, this is a nice idea, but we need to go help our companies, our portfolio companies, because all of their money was at Silicon Valley Bank and that bank just collapsed. So we can't talk now, bye. And that was a harsh start. That was a hard one. I definitely had a cry in a cafe. I was like, this is going to be really difficult. Yeah, that was hard.
I think the other thing that's worth remembering, and this is a lesson I had to learn, is as a founder, your job is to learn faster than the environment and then the market. Because we weren't from traditional banking backgrounds. Like I had stopped being on active duty status December 22. So it's like a very non-trivial context shift. Or all of a sudden, like you're not just battling tough macroeconomic environments or really tough banking environments, but you're having to not just understand an industry, but understand it better than the people in it, because they understood as well as you did, and they'd already built a solution. And you're doing that while racing against the fact that because we're a married team, you bet the mortgage on this working. Thankfully, I didn't know that that's what I was signing up for. Like, very gratefully, I just learned the immensity of what we're signed up for over the course of like several months, by which point we'd been lucky enough to make it to Techstars, which is a really big inflection. Parlay has been incredibly blessed over the last few years. We had a seed round that closed this summer. We're growing really well, but I'd say year one and year two, for any like the veteran founders listening, you have to balance these really interesting poles, right? You have to be gritty enough to keep going and humble enough to listen. You have to know when to pivot and when to persevere. And nobody can tell you those things. Like there's no book that has the answer because you're building in a really unique context. So I think, the analogy Alex and I sometimes use is it's like showing up at the gym and having drill instructors barking in your face, and you're not sure what exercise you should be doing when or how. You just know that a lot of people are yelling, and you have to keep going for years. You're supposed to suddenly know how to do like Olympic lifting. You didn't get that memo. Like for me, it's some of like corporate finance was a thing like that. That was not an infantry skill. Same thing with marketing and complex sales operations. That was just like not a part of my personal professional development path.
So can you share with us a moment you two disagreed about a fundamental part of Parlay? And
Oh my God. Every hour, every day.
Every hour?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, honestly, the sparring is real. Learning to fight as a team is important. Like there's a degree of light sparring on probably a multiple time a day basis. At the strategic level, one of the things we did very intentionally was I was smart enough to realize Alex had actual business experience. Like being a soldier may make you like proficient at leading. But when we got out, it was very clear that Alex was going to have the veto vote if we came to like a really tough fork in the road, because he just had so much more like knowledge and context. What's cool though, is I don't know that that's ever really been necessary.
I don't think I've pulled a veto card.
We've fought through a lot. We've like battled through James again, who's not on the call, but has been critical to all the good decisions. I often feel more often than not, Alex and James will agree and I'll be off. And then like the simple voting count is usually what's used.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
So you guys don't use rock, paper, scissors or anything like that? Okay.
No.
There's one scenario actually where when the three of us are deciding on a hire, if any one of us says, I actually don't agree with this hire, then we're not going to hire that person. That's the one exception to that.
So let's jump to Detachment 201. The Army is really fired up about it. And so, Jay, you're currently serving in the reserves as part of Detachment 201. Tell our listeners what it is and what is your role?
Yes. So the military has done a lot of work over the last 20 years on accelerating digital transformation. And the first thing we focused on really extensively was, are we engaging enough with industry to accelerate transformation and innovation at the speed of what's necessary? And I think Dailey's done a really good job of building alignment with the Valley in a way that's super cool. The tech sector, I think, definitely understands the importance of working with the national security community. And I think you can see that Y Combinator had a company recently in that like built missiles. Like that was a first. You see billions flowing into venture capital. So in some ways, industry is there. And the next problem then becomes, okay, we have industry support, we have capital, we actually have alignment. The challenge then becomes the doing it. And the Army is a people business. From the moment you join, you recognize that your responsibility is to each other and the team. And so as a part of bringing on that talent, there's a recognition that we had to lean more into how we direct commission talent and who we're bringing in, because a lot of the skills we need, you can't train in the military. And so what the Chief of Staff of the Army and senior leaders in the Pentagon did was they said, hey, let's very intentionally and very mindfully bring in a small group of hand-selected leaders from industry whose world-class experience can ensure that we can best execute against the CSA and the Army and Secretary of the Army's strategic technology goals. And so we've been really lucky and grateful to have a bunch of incredible technologists raise their hand and do the training. And I was really lucky and fortunate to be able to serve as their commander.
Nice. That's got to be interesting. So you're PTing them and they're making your head hurt.
They're really good at speaking to you where you are. Like, I like to think that I've read a book or two, but you're dealing with individuals that have like rebuilt the modern economy and that have transformed, like created AI-based technologies that alter the way business and markets function. But what's been cool is that they have a very humble, servant-oriented leader perspective. They listen to soldiers. They're working as an extension of mission. Like, they're incredibly selfless in the way that they're serving, and that's something we're deeply grateful for.
So one final question for you guys. What's the biggest piece of advice that you have for military couples that are thinking about starting a company together?
I love the question. It's a nuanced question because I think sometimes people will get back to me and Jay and they're like, wow, you're a married couple doing this? I could never do that. In fact, that's probably the natural 9 out of 10 times that's what we'll hear. And in the beginning, that would bother me a bit because I thought, okay, well, I didn't ask you. First of all, I don't need your opinion on this. But second, is that a bad thing as a result? Should I be worried about that? We had some venture capitalists who refused to back us because of it. They were like, well, it's too much risk. We don't want to do that. They came around in the end. But it took a few years, right, for them to see how we work and to earn that trust. And so what I would say to married co-founders is, before you even decide to do it, know that entrepreneurship will make everything more intense. And so if you're a good team, I think it'll force you to be an even better team. If you guys have some tension or some hardship in your marriage, like it's going to make that 10 times worse. And for me, it's a preference of how I want to live. I want to build businesses. I want to create value. I want to do things that are unreasonable. And doing unreasonable things means living a bit unreasonably as well. Like, this isn't a 9 to 5, normal W-2 job. That never was part of the gig or the expectation, but we've taken it even further by living together and doing everything together 24/7.
Yeah. So I think you have to know why you're doing it, because it's going to be years of pain, right? So like, you're actually going to found a company as a team. You're committing to like 18 hours a day working as a team. I joke sometimes that Alex is kind of like my Ranger buddy back in Ranger school, where you have to be like arm's distance away. Like, being co-founders and spouses, you're going to be working together a ton. The other thing I'd say, if you're even thinking about entrepreneurship, there's some things to take care of early. The first is like, you need to make sure that you've saved enough that you can afford to withstand that first 6 to 12 months. Because if you're going to go all in as a team, that's likely going to be your revenue source. So there's like some preconditions, and like Alex and I started saving and making financial decisions for this before launching that are important. So I'd say, 1, make sure your oxygen mask is on and you can do it. 2, I think it's really important to remind any listeners that you're only as good as your information environment. And the reason that's relevant is you need to be super mindful about who your mentors are and who you're learning from. Ryan Johnson, a really fantastic veteran founder, really early in our journey was really clear about, like, only listen to other founders and your customers. Everyone else is going to have opinions and they're probably going to confuse you, which has been true.
That's good. But what do you guys do for fun? I mean, do y'all talk about financial stuff when you go on date night, or what is it? What do y'all do?
Well, we like to do hard things for fun as well. So Jay and I are actually going next week on a trek in Nepal for 2 weeks called the Annapurna Circuit, which is about 100 miles of trekking. So hard things is the hobby, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys sharing that.
In late 2015, a number of military spouses at Fort Bliss, Texas, realized the cost of attending balls and formal events was too much for some, and set out to fix that by starting Operation Deploy Your Dress. What started as a small one-day dress swap has expanded to 15 permanent locations across the country, 1 in Germany, and a large number of pop-ups, including annual ones in Hawaii, and even at AUSA's headquarters. Through the first decade of their existence, Operation Deploy Your Dress's all-volunteer force has been able to give out thousands of formal gowns and accessories to families at no cost. If you would like to donate a dress, volunteer, or simply find out more about the organization, please check out OperationDeployYourDress.org. That's OperationDeployYourDress.org. They would love to hear from you. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. AUSA's Army Matters podcast is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army Connected. Visit us at ausa.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, and anchor hosted by Carrie Viral-Hackes. Anthony Del Call is the producer and writer, and Andy Bosnack is the associate producer and supervising sound editor. Ellen Toner is the content editor. Unzinga Curry is the executive producer, and the senior producers are Carrie Viral-Hackes and LaSharon Duncan. Be sure to subscribe to the Army Matters podcast wherever you find your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reese Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word REAP. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. I'm LaSharon Duncan, hoping you have a great Army day. Hooah!